welcome to episode 2.
The starting is always hard because now when I was talking to you earlier, I was like, I had so many things in my head, and now I'm like, fuck, the record button has been hit, and now I don't know what's the perfect thing to say to start it so that when people listen to it, they're gonna like what I'm saying and continue to listen to it for the next 30 minutes.
I think that when you're in that spotlight, you are more scared than when the stakes are nothing and nothing you do really matters, but you also feel much more alive. Like you're dialed in, you're constantly thinking about the right move, and all of your capacity is now being dedicated to delivering that result that you want to deliver. And over time it gets easier because you get more comfortable with being in that spotlight, but it's always very important to stay in that spotlight even if you never really feel prepared
Yeah,
for
I
it yet.
think that's a great point because you and I debated like throughout college, and we got into that activity being not good at it. We had no background of debating. And for people listening, like, this is like you're given this motion on any obscure topic about morality or international relations or economics, and you're given 15 minutes to prep, and then you have to deliver a 7-minute speech. And I used to usually go first speaker in these debates. Going into those 15 minutes, I has to be like, I have to start this debate. If I don't do it right, then my team is not gonna come back from it, and I'm gonna not be able to do it. But in those 7 minutes, I used to feel exactly what you said. I used to feel this thrill and I used to feel this fear. And then I would go and do it because I'm there and I have prep. Whether it's good or bad, I'm here and I'm just gonna have to do it. So might as well. I'm not gonna walk away from it. And I think that is what I want to talk about today, which is us having these dreams that are not our goals. And we'll get in a second about like why it's a goal versus a dream. But us having these dreams that are not goals, and it's almost like this symbolism is me going up to that podium trying to deliver that speech and thinking I'm not prepared enough and not good enough, and instead of doing whatever I can with the resources I have, walking away and being like, I'm not doing the speech.
Which is interesting because public speaking is so many people's mortal fear.
Yeah.
It's the scariest thing that a lot of them can think about, but because of the fact that I kept putting myself on that stage again and again and again and again for all of those appearances, it's second nature to me now. I do feel that fear, but I think breaking through it is what is a lot easier now.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And it's easier now because of the practice that I had in pushing it aside, right? Or going through it and then turning that fear into almost like a weapon, right? The way that a B school prof explained this to me was you have a war room inside your head,
Yeah.
and it keeps predicting these disaster scenarios of like what can go wrong, what can go wrong. But that analytical capability that that anxiety gives you is a friend because it also forces you to think about the perfect course of action. But at some point you have to just act. So you may have like 10 different things that are the right thing to say in that debate speech, which might win it for you. But you have to select two and just go for it. And that's what that time limit forces you to do, because at some point you just have to go up and speak. And I think getting used to that feeling that at some, I'll have to act. I will have a lot of uncertainty, but I'll have to take a call and then do it. That is what got easier with time. And ultimately that's how you get better at anything.
I want to talk about, like, debating was this dream for me, right? It was never a goal. I could have just not done it in college. I could have just lived a normal college life. I wouldn't have had this experience. It was definitely enjoyable a lot, but it also wasn't. It was quite stressful, harsh on you. Like, It definitely took a toll on my mental health, but we did it. My question, I think, is why are we calling these dreams? Why aren't we calling these things goals? I know you did a stand-up comedy routine at when you were at ISB. It had nothing to do with your course, right? You just
Like, what for me makes something a dream is if it's something that I don't think I can do right now or in the immediate future, but given enough time, it might happen and it would be like a great thing to have happen to me. And a goal, on the other hand, is more immediate. Like, you have to focus on making it happen, you have to actually take action to get closer to the outcome you want. But with a dream, it's like you find solace in it. It's like a place of escape for you, right? And deep down, I think you almost don't want to try to get it, because that opens up the door to possibly never getting it, of
mm,
trying to get it and not doing it. But with stand up comedy, what happened was that I was done with placements, right? I had a McKinsey job offer, and I had the GPA I wanted. I basically had everything I went into ISB for when it came to the conventional things that you go to B school for. I got placed, and then I had like 3 or 4 terms left, and academics didn't matter as much anymore. So I wanted to really push myself and find something that would evoke the same kind of drive that preparing for McKinsey instilled in me. And that's what stand up did, because fundamentally it was something that I was always made to believe I couldn't do, that I don't have great comedic timing, or that I'm just not funny. I'm like a serious person. And I wanted to break through that and just put myself out there and see what works. So I put a lot of thought into it. I actually did a couple of practice sets with the ISB Stand Up Comedy Club, and then I performed a set in front of like 70, 80 people. And in a lot of ways, it was similar to debating,
yeah,
but it's a lot slower. You have to make sure that you deliver the punchlines right. There is a structure to every joke, and it's almost like a 10-15 minute speech. It's a lot more
mm,
interactive, and you are interacting with the audience instead of your opponent. But I realized that it was something I enjoyed very much. And it also taught me that what people say about me and what I believe about myself are not really things that should hamper me from doing something I've dreamed of doing in any tangible manner. It's just imaginary, it's artificial.
yeah.
These rules that we create for ourselves, that we can't do X because our traits do not support the doing of X.
Yeah, it's almost not real, right? It's real because you are giving that trait power in your own head, saying, hey, this is the trait that somebody else has said that I have, or this is a trait that this inner voice in my head is saying that I have. Let me give it more power by saying that it's true. Instead, you can just say that it's not true. There was this dream of maybe like being a funny person and for once, doing this stand-up comedy act at business school, and you had this option of taking action and not, and you said that one of the things was your belief, right? I think there's another element to this that I also feel very related to when it comes to the distinction between dreams and goals, which is taking action. One is belief and the other one is the path to actually doing it. I have this dream, I would say, which exactly characterized by the definition you gave, which is sometime in the future I want to get into business school, and I want to play a DJ set for my classmates, and I want to be on this side. I want to play my favorite tunes. I want to interact with them through like this projector screen that I have on the background, and I want to see them dancing and having a good time. And it's somewhere in the future where I'm like, I like the idea of it. I don't know if I'll achieve it. I really want to achieve it though. I really want to do it. I dream about it all the time. So I have this dream. I think I can do it. So I have the belief, and then comes the path. Like, how do I do it? Like, what do I do? Like, I know the actions, but sometimes it's just like too hard, or I can just abandon it and I'll be okay with abandoning it. But when you did this stand up comedy thing, like, what was your path?
To be fair, I think I would not look at stand up as something that I was incredibly afraid to do or didn't know how to do or something like that. It was a straightforward process. I'd say that the first step was summoning the courage, which borrowed from my debate experience, my public speaking experience. To me, it felt like just another speech. So I gave myself reason to believe that this was something I could be good at, provided I had a strong script. Also, like, I'm a consumer of media, and I'm able to identify a lot of the first principles that make a certain kind of performance good or bad. Some of the fundamentals came to me quite naturally, right? The idea that there has to be a setup and then a build up and then a payoff and things like that, right? And how these things need to link
Yeah.
together. So the belief part was um, not super hard to overcome. And I also had like very strong motivations. I wanted to impress my batchmates. I wanted to break this idea that I am this deadpan, serious motherfucker, right? And so that created this drive in me to do it. And I gave into that drive and I was like, fuck it. Even if I bomb, even if it's the worst, set ever, if people make fun of me, it's okay. I'm going to do it anyway. And the second part of that, figuring out the how to do it, part of it was like my own research where I just decided, okay, let's just Google how to do it and see what comes up. And the second was quite important, which was that the stand up club on campus was actually quite supportive. So they had these sort of open comedy nights, and anybody could sign up and they would work on your set
Mm.
with you. So that to me was like some reassurance, which is that I can test it beforehand with these people and get feedback and then improve on that and make sure that I'm at least not like that it's not a complete disaster on the day that I'm delivering the final set. So that path, right, to me, one incredibly important step on it was finding the right people that could help me and that who could show it to me that okay, we have done this and here is how you can do it too.
We spoke about this in our previous episode. These are people that are relatable. They're not gonna come to you and tell you, "Look, we've done it." It's because I have this inherent inner trait that I'm just geared and wired to be funny. These are people who are gonna be like, "If I can do it, then anyone can do it. You can definitely do it. This is the path to follow it." Right? We were just talking about this concept of the hero's journey, and which starts, I think, with a call to adventure, right?
Exactly. I started really seriously thinking about the hero's journey when adopt when I went back to one of my dreams, which is to publish a novel. The hard part for me about writing a book of some 200, 300 pages is understanding what will happen in the middle parts and the end parts. I've written out the beginning and I know what my story is going to be about. And I've introduced the key players and I've done those sorts of things. I know who the hero is and what the call to adventure for them will be. But for the rest of it, I started looking into frameworks that exist out there and I had read about the hero's journey. So this is basically the Monomyth by Joseph Campbell. It's like a general structure that almost every story about any hero who goes on like a great adventure tends to follow. And I've seen examples of it in my own life where anything that I started out on followed this arc.
What is this arc?
So there are 12 steps in the hero's journey, right? Step 1 is the ordinary world, right, which is
Okay.
status quo. And it's basically like a situation where things aren't great, like they're just
Mhm.
normal, right?
Like you can do with it,
Typically,
right? It's fine.
yeah, it's all right. It's not perfect, or sometimes it even is. And then the call to adventure can be that everything goes to shit, and then you have to fix it. But it's basically like a way of saying this is the status quo. This is what things are like right now, and and then something big changes in that situation, which is your call to adventure. Something happens with you, or something comes in your path that gives you this overwhelming urge to begin that adventure or overcome that challenge that you need to overcome. The step that follows is a refusal of the call, right? So you don't want to make that big step. You don't want to start that adventure because some part of you is really, really scared of what's going to happen if you do, right? And sometimes it's like a rational fear, which is I might die or I might, get into some dangerous situations. And at other times, that fear is just internal. It's a fear of failure, of
I have a
disappointment,
question.
right?
At this
Yeah.
refusal to call, and you said sometimes those fears are rational. I sometimes feel like we are so good at rationalizing our irrational fears that that becomes a limiting factor. I am very scared of like what will happen with this podcast, and it's that I'll put it out online and people will be like, what are these guys talking about? This makes absolutely no sense. It'll ruin my uh, image. That's one. The second will be that nobody ever listens to it. It's just out there, and we have taken the call to adventure, which is to do this. And then at the same time, I'm also going through the phase of like refusal to take the call, even though I'm in the act that with all these fears coming up, and my rational brain is saying, you can do anything else. Why are you doing this? Just do something else, right? And I don't know if that rational fear is very rational when there is a call to adventure. What do you think about that?
I think these are legitimate fears to have.
Yeah,
Perhaps, okay, maybe I don't empathize so much with the idea that people will watch this online and make fun of us, but I am afraid of saying something that invites a lot of ridicule,
yeah,
of saying something super dumb. And if you have like long recordings of people talking, they are inevitably going to fuck something up and say something that is going to be a foot and mouth moment for them. And I am afraid of getting cancelled. I'm afraid of becoming a big public figure and then having skeletons come out of my closet of people that want to shoot me down because they have beef with me, and those sorts of things, right? So my brain conjures up these scenarios of why I should not put myself out there,
exactly. Yeah,
why bad things will happen to me if I step out of my comfort zone, if I try to become bigger than my place in life that has been decided by somebody
yeah,
else. But I think that's where you need an external voice's help as well, right? So to me, for example, your fears sound like something that we can deal with fairly easily, and I don't know if like mine sound that way to you as well. But I think in your head, right, it's like this huge dragon that you can't beat, whatever it is that's stopping you from doing the thing you want to do. But when you narrate it for somebody else, it diminishes until like it's like basically nothing,
yeah,
right? And that's where I think the next step becomes very important, which is meeting the mentor, right? And this is like another person that gives you something you need, which could be advice, training, or some kind of powerful
yeah,
object in the
yeah,
story. And I think when it comes to the podcast, you are my mentor,
yeah.
right? Because like I have always thought about putting myself out there and as moving towards becoming more of a public figure, at least giving value to other people when it comes through creative pursuits like this. But I had these fears that prevented me from actually doing it consistently, and then you stepped in, right? And the call to adventure was starting this with you, and then the mentor was also you, because if I have any doubts, then you were there to help me with them, right?
Yeah,
But I think
we
that,
can keep expressing whatever fears we have to each other, and we might both have those fears, and then we seek support from other people. But most of the times we can just hold each other accountable and be like, that's not even a thing, or if it is a thing, then this is how I've dealt with it before, and we can deal with it.
yeah, it's sort of like when you're at the bar and you see this beautiful woman and you want to go speak to her, but then every bone in
Rebelling
your
against.
body is that command, and it's the easiest thing in the world. The stakes are literally zero. Nothing will change if you go speak to her and she just isn't interested. But you just don't want to do it. You don't want to take that shot, because what if you get rejected? What if something really terrible happens? But then your bro comes and gasses you up and says, this is nothing, just go do it, nothing will change. And then you go and do it and you end up getting a phone number or whatever, right? Like, or something bad might happen, but you never lose anything from that experience, right? Which reminds me of this quote from Don Quixote by Miguel Cervantes, which is basically that as long as something is gained, nothing is lost. And Don Quixote is also a very interesting story in this context, because it's about a knight who has delusions about what he's going to achieve in this world, and then he just goes on this adventure and he's chasing windmills and he's doing those sorts of
Yeah.
things. And that reminds me of what we're trying to do here as well, right? Which is just go out there and achieve something incredibly improbable, getting 100,000 followers on Instagram, or
Or to me, just being consistent about this. In the hero's journey, I've gone beyond the refusal of the call and accepted the call. I've met the mentor, which is you. We're doing it together. I and then is the threshold. The threshold to me personally is abandoning it, abandoning this, and being like, I'm not getting anything out of this. And then this voice in my head always saying, just why are you spending your 2 hours on a Sunday doing this? Like, do something else or do nothing. Just sit and relax. And relax is a uh, proxy for saying just sit there and like scroll reels on Insta. And
give me one sec.
yeah, and there are like these multitude of rational reasons that will come where when I get to a threshold of like doing this maybe for 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 2 months rather, I'll just be like, this seems like a drag. I don't want to do this. And I think that's my threshold, which is I want to do this consistently, unless planned to not do it. I want to consistently do it for a long time, and I have this fear that I'll just abandon it, even when I don't want to abandon it, and that's my fear, and that's my threshold. What do you think is your threshold?
My threshold was just recording. Okay, no, to be fair, I'll tell you what my actual threshold is. I think once we have uploaded this on YouTube, once it's out there for people to see, that's the threshold, which is I've started and I'm going to get feedback and people are going to view this. But it's the next step that I'm afraid of, right? Which is when the disappointment could actually arrive. So right now we have a lot of the excitement of starting this and then making our first one or two episodes, and there's a lot of euphoria that just comes from taking action. And the smallest thing you do makes you feel like you accomplished something incredible, because it was unthinkable to even do this much a while ago. But then the game gets harder because you level up and the bosses are not going to stay the same, and your challenges are going to increase in difficulty. So that's where the true test happens. Let's say we put out 10 videos and we have no viewership.
Yeah.
what are we going to do at that time? Are we going to regroup, continue? Are we going to stay consistent? Will we stick to it? What happens when your wedding approaches, or when my other projects start to take over and I have less free time than I did before? Will I make the time for this? Or will I abandon it like the millions of other projects I've abandoned?
Yeah, same.
That to me is the part of which really will make the difference between whether this is going to be a success both at a personal and a commercial level, or or it'll just be another unfinished project. But I don't, like I said, I don't want any more unfinished projects. I'm fucking sick of
We all have those.
finishing
I
stuff.
have an entire, like, all my unfinished projects won't even fit. Like, I don't know, in this room, there are so many of them, if you can quantify them. And I'm tired of them. But I think so that's to you number six, which is test allies and enemies, is the point at which you feel like it's gonna it's gonna be your hardest step.
Yeah, just breaking through the drudgery of like the suck, right? They call it embracing the suck.
What's level 7?
Level 7 is approach to the inmost cave. This is when you can see this big dragon that you need to kill, and then like you and your buddies have to like come up with a plan to do it. What's a movie you watched recently that I might also have seen?
I watched the Nolan movie about
Oppenheimer.
Oppenheimer. Yeah,
So in Oppenheimer, I think the inmost cave is when they manage to figure out. You remember there's like this part of the movie where they have to, there is some equation that they are trying to solve, and it basically tells them that there is a small chance they can destroy the Earth's atmosphere.
yeah. And they're also, right after that, they've created the bomb and they're doing their first test.
Yeah. So that part to me, I think, is the inmost cave. They're preparing to actually like go for it, and they know that this is something that could kill all of them, but they have to do it. And then comes the ordeal, which is like they have to overcome that fear, their greatest fear, and then do it, test the bomb, and then they survive and they get the reward, and then they go back to the ordinary world.
I like this. I like it because the way that we went through the hero's journey, we focused so much on the 1 to, what is it, 1 to 9, 1 to 8, which is all about the path and the journey. And even in the way that you said reward, it was almost like, yeah, they go through they go through the ordeal. We discussed it, we used examples, and the reward is just like, yeah, and they get the reward, and it's almost not important at that point, right? But in real life, the reward is what we're like, we won't get the reward, we won't get 100,000 followers, we won't become the best podcast, nobody listen to us, and we just frame our entire idea of acting and chasing that dream on the reward, whereas it's, once you get it, the reward is almost the end point of the journey, and there's, you need to start another one to have fun.
Yeah, dude, if I think about all the stories I love, I didn't care about the part where Frodo tossed the ring into the lava and got the reward, like, which was killing Sauron. Like, to me, all of the difficult parts, the near death experiences, the battles, getting separated from your allies, getting kidnapped by giant spiders, that shit was interesting. Where you're always wondering, how will this guy get out of this shit?
Yeah,
But when it's me in the driver's seat, this is the part I least look forward to. It's the part that creates the greatest fear in me. It's the part I always avoid through procrastination or through numbing myself with fucking Insta reels or whatever, right? But when you look back, it's this stuff that really added all of the value, and that made it rewarding, which is crazy. But and now it seems so small when you look at it, right? It's such a small part, because even after the reward and after you make it back to the ordinary world, right, there is another last challenge that you face. where everything is at stake. And in Oppenheimer, I think this was the trial that he goes through.
Yeah.
Um, and after that, you finish your journey with like some symbolic power that you took away from it.
And that symbolic power almost comes during the journey.
It's building, 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 and then it changes you irrevocably, and um, often for the better. So I think if I take any of the various different things I've pursued in my life, all of them are at various different stages of the hero's
Yeah.
journey. And one of the most recent examples I can think of is my trip to South America. And I think that seemed to mirror this entire process almost word for word. So this is something that I had been planning for a very, very long time. So it's like since final year of college, which was 2017, I have wanted to go to Mexico.
I
I
know you
wanted to
want
go
to go
to South
Mexico.
America, all of those things, right? Like I wanted to go to Latin America. And the problem is that it's really, really far from India.
Yeah.
And so the tickets can be incredibly expensive, prohibitively expensive. Unless you're rich and you have a very specific reason to go there, most Indians will never make that trip to any country. Colombia, Brazil, Argentina. Some people may go on their honeymoons there, but they'll visit at most one country,
Mm-hmm.
right? And compare that to like Europe, where it's so easy to just see like 6 or 7 countries on any trip that you
Mm-hmm.
make because you've got like this unified visa or whatever. It's just a very, very difficult journey to make. But it wasn't even the going to South America and seeing South America, which was the reward I wanted, but it represented an adventure in my mind, right? Which was going somewhere that Indians do not go
Okay.
in large numbers at all. Like having those stamps on my passport that 99% of people I meet will not have. And entering this culture that is just so different from mine and coming away from that having changed, right? That was what I wanted for years, right? Something or other came in the way and it just couldn't happen. So that was my ordinary life, my ordinary world, where I was working at McKinsey and I was sleeping 3 hours a night on this fucking burner of a project. And at like 4 a.m. one night after I finished formatting a set of slides, I just randomly opened, yeah, I randomly opened Skyscanner and I checked Mexico tickets. That was the first country that I decided to plan a trip to for some reason because I guess it seemed like the easiest option because it's closer to the US and all of that. But I started exploring ticket prices and I figured, fuck it, this year I have to go. I have to figure something out.
That was your call to
It has a long
adventure.
enough horizon.
That was your call to
Yeah,
adventure.
it was my call to adventure. So, and I also remember New Year's Eve that year, I really, really got wasted on like a lot of Jaeger. And then I woke up in the morning and I realized that the previous night I had been trying to book tickets. But I failed because it asks you for your passport number and I didn't remember mine. So I probably abandoned it midway. But I was like, wow, I could have drunkenly booked these tickets for sober me to deal with the next day. So I realized that it is something that some part of me really, really wants to do
Yeah.
against all odds, right? And I guess like after that call to adventure, right? Like I did refuse it. I was like, fuck it. It's not possible, right? It's too far away. It's too expensive. It's too difficult to plan. Um, there's not enough time. How will I get the leave for it, etc., etc.? It just seemed like a really bad idea.
Yeah.
And even when Gaur agreed to go with me, my friend Prabhakar, our friend, right? Like even when he said that he's in, right? He had doubts. And at one point of time, he said to me, should we try going somewhere closer instead? Because South America seems like a really, really far away and difficult trip to make. Perhaps we're stretching ourselves too thin.
Yeah.
And as you know, I used that as an excuse to cancel it, right? I was
You
like, yeah,
cancel the trip.
initially, yeah. So I was like, fuck it. He's right. We should be a little more reasonable, and maybe we'll go to, I don't know, Georgia or like fucking someplace in Europe or
So
something,
that
right?
was your refusal to the call.
Yeah, I refused
Yeah.
it. And I also used the fact that my friend Shreya's wedding was on the 25th of December
Yep.
as one more excuse to not do the trip. Because I figured, okay, after 25th, there's only 1 or 2 weeks of holidays left. So, yeah, there's no point going to South America anyway, right? And then I told Gaur as much. I was like, fuck it, let's not do South America. Let's go somewhere else. And then, like, I remember he didn't reply to that text for like 4 or 5 days. And I called him and he didn't pick up. And then one night at like 2 a.m. or something, maybe he was drunk or something like that, but he sent me a text saying what you did wasn't cool. And I just thought like I'd let you know, right? And I was like, "What are you talking? Are you talking about the South America trip?" He's like, "Yeah, you canceled it." I was like, "Dog, like I thought you didn't want to go, right?" Like, and you know, in that moment, something just awoke in me, which was like, "Fuck it, let's go all out. Let's take like a month's vacation. Let's plan everything in such a manner that this is going to be the grandest and best trip ever." And Gauze and I'm in. Let's fucking do it, right?
So at
And
that
so he
point,
became the mentor.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. He became your mentor.
And then we started work, and I guess in his story I was the mentor
Yeah.
because he's looking for this adventure, right? Like if I were to put myself in his shoes, it's like very similar. I'm working at ZS, I'm working 20 hours a day. I haven't been anywhere outside of India in my entire life. You know, I'm single, blah blah blah. Not much is going for me right now. And then in comes Abhilaksh with like grand adventure, right? And um, yeah, we're in our late 20s. We need to do something big before the time to do it fades away, right? And all of that. And then I was that person in his life, right? And then after that, we crossed the threshold, right? Which was actually like planning the whole thing, looking at what visas we might need, figuring out the leave situation, figuring out the budget.
And those are very real
Um,
constraints, that those are the first things that come up when somebody's planning a trip, but also the realities are the worst and the most annoying barriers whenever you try to do any when you try to pursue any dream. It's just like, yeah, this is good, like wanting to like take a month off and go to South America. It's great, but like, do you really want to do this like at this point of time in your career? Like, you've just joined this like prestigious consulting firm. You should put like all your effort into it and try to get a promotion or two, and then you can do this. But that's what we've always been told, like as a when you're a kid. I feel like people very often say that like study really hard like in your 11th and 12th, like once you get into a great college then you can have fun. Like in college they tell you like once you get a great job then you can have fun. Then you get a job and then they tell you like, oh, work hard, get a couple of promotions, and then when you're like settled in life then you can have fun. But you're just like kicking the can like a little farther. You're not ever crossing that threshold. Like the rational things are just the worst.
and then I guess the next part of this, which was the tests and the allies and the enemies, right? I think this part was the whole convincing Kaza to come, talking to you guys, trying to get you to come, and like all of that. And then dealing with that whole process of realizing that nobody else wants to do this, right? That we are going to be truly alone when it comes to this huge fucking trip that we're about to make. And I think that's where this like inmost cave situation happened, right? Which is where we were this close to actually like leaving. We had just started our visa processes, and like I guess some of the tickets were booked and like things like that had happened. But we had to now grapple with the fact that we were going to be going to a very, very strange land with just the two of us, right? None of our friends were going to be there with us. And I think that's where like our greatest fear popped up. Yes, it was too late to refuse the call at this point again because we already had tickets booked and shit like that. But I think the obstacle was, what if it's a disappointment? What if you go there and you realize this place fucking sucks,
Yeah. That you don't
right?
enjoy
Or
it.
like you don't enjoy it, you don't have fun, you don't make friends because it's just the two of you. Like all of the skills you needed to call upon, or the good things you wanted to happen to you, you will be social and you will be outgoing and you will be making memories. What if none of that shit happens? What if you're just miserable? And then turns out you wasted like 4.5 lakh on some bullshit when you could have just as easily gone to Thailand or whatever, Bali, or where else do Indian people
Yeah.
go, right? You could have just like gone to Vietnam or some shit, right? But no, you had to go on like this grand adventure, and then it ended up sucking. Like, what if that happened, right?
Yeah.
And then we actually went on that trip, and none of that happened. Yeah, yeah. And part of the ordeal was also during that trip, right? We had to overcome that fear to create fun for ourselves, right? So I can tell you this: every single morning at the hostel's common room, my heart rate was probably like 130 beats per minute because I did not want to waste this day. I thought the worst thing that could happen, is I don't have any fun today. I don't meet any new people today. I don't really step out of that zone that I got used to in India, which is like this place of introversion, of familiarity, of like
Yeah.
just mundane shit,
And
right?
that
So,
is very
hmm,
like that's everyone's fear, right? Like going through this journey, like every time you end up on if you go on a trip like this, or bigger than that, if you're pursuing like another dream, everybody's fear is that when you're doing it, you get to this critical point, critical juncture where you're like, all right, now I have to act. I'm way too in it to back out now, but this is the point at which it will decide whether, according to me, it's a success or a failure, and I might completely screw this up. For you, it might have been like, I might talk to these people and they might not like me and I might not hang out with them and I might just have to be here by myself, or I might not know what to do with my time today, because at that point you feel like you're the only person responsible for how you have fun. Nobody's going to do it for you. You have to do it.
yeah. And having fun is in this context is something I had never done before. I had no experience when it came to this sort of thing, right? Like, I'm an Indian guy who grew up in India. Okay, like I spent a year in the US, fine, but like solo traveling, or kind of, because God was there. But
It's sort of solo and it can be very
yeah,
confronting to be like, I don't have other friends of mine who to lean on to like make friends on our behalf and like take the group somewhere. That
exactly. So I don't have Ronit like here who will fucking go talk to this person or that person and then tell us, hey, we've been invited to a party this evening. Like, none of that shit's gonna happen, right? It's gotta be you. Like, you gotta do it, bro. Like, so that was just the conversation that I would have with myself, right? So, exactly what you said. There's no support, nothing. You're in there and like you're like, fucking hell, like I gotta do something, right? And you've got this like crippling fear taking over you, but then you're like, I gotta act, right? And
before you go on,
that's what yeah,
I have to
yeah.
ask, at that point when you there was that crippling fear and you said you gotta act, it was an option, right? You could have not acted. Was there a fear on the other end that was also thinking about the consequences of not acting?
Yes. So it's weird because I was really, really, really afraid of rejection, right? I was really afraid of like starting a conversation with somebody and creeping them out or whatever, right? Or they don't think I'm cool, or they think, who the fuck is this like Indian person trying to speak to me or whatever. I had all of these internalized fears that prevented me from trying to make friends with strangers at hostels, right? Or like at clubs or wherever it is that we were going. But there was another deep seated fear inside me, right? One that had prompted me to go to this trip at all. which was, what if nothing ever changes? Like, um, what if I never change? What if I never learn to be social? What if I don't make good memories from this trip? What if this trip is a waste, right? Um, and what if the rest of my life is spent with the cold realization that I had the opportunity to act and I didn't, and then I never get that chance again, right? So that fear was larger than my fear of rejection in that moment, and I had to remind myself of it every single day. So part of it was the positive, which was, if we put ourselves out there, we make friends and we have a good time and we make memories. But then the other part of it was negative, which was, if we don't take action, that life of mediocrity and mundane BS that we got used to, and we will never really get all of the things we dreamed of getting, and then we'll die or whatever.
That makes me wonder,
So,
like, whenever I have had these moments of reckoning where I have to act, I don't want to act, I always try to push myself by thinking about the positives of acting. But what you did in this case was thought about the fear of not acting. So you're pitting one fear, which is the fear of actually going ahead and embarrassing yourself, with the other fear of, what if I don't take this leap of faith? Or what if I don't act? And then you fight fear with fear. You'll be like, that fear is much worse. I don't want to be that. It's that fear I go back with, and I will feel horrible about myself. So it's interesting to reframe your fear and use it positively, right?
yeah, and I've done this multiple times, right? I'll give you a really nice example, but it's kind of cheesy. But anyway, so me and Ryan were at Watson's, which is a really nice bar in Bangalore, and there was this woman there who just caught my eye. Like, I was like, she's got this vibe, right? Like, I have a huge crush on her. I absolutely have to talk to her, right? Like, no matter what, right? And then we walked in at 9 p.m. and in Bangalore shut at like 12:30. So I figured, okay, I have 3.5 hours to do it. But I also knew that the longer you wait, the higher the chances that somebody else will swoop in and like start talking to that person, and your window is gone, right? Or anything can happen, or she can leave in like an hour or so and go bounce to another club, right? But I let myself take it easy, right? And I didn't act for like an hour or an hour and a half, right? And then like Ryan knew that I was interested in that woman because I kept looking at her, right? And Ryan was like, okay, what's going on? Why aren't you talking to her, right? And I was like, I don't know, bro, like, I'm waiting for the right moment. And he was like, okay, cool, but what are you gonna say, right? And I knew what I wanted to say to her, right? But I was just like, fuck, man, like, she's so scary, like, or whatever. I just talked myself into like not doing it. And then Ryan was like, all right, because he wasn't super invested in me talking to her or not talking to her. To him, like, it's like, okay, doesn't matter. But then I was like, I gotta do something, dude. Like, I just like, I have to take action. I need to take action. I gotta try. But I was really, really scared. I was scared of what would happen if I did it, right? So what I ended up doing was, I turned to Ryan and I said, look, if I don't talk to this girl tonight, I am walking home. And he's like, you're walking home to HSR from here? I'm like, yeah. He's like, that's really far away, right? I was like, yeah, it's really far away, but I will walk. You are not allowed to drop me home. I'm not allowed to call a cab. If I don't talk to her tonight, I need to do it. I need to walk home, right? And this was at like 10 o'clock or something. And Ryan was like, okay, cool, I'll hold you to it. And then pretty soon, like, it was 11:30 and I still hadn't spoken to her. So I only had like one
Okay.
hour left, right? And then I was like, I took my phone out and I opened Google Maps and I checked the distance between the bar and my home. And it was a 5.5 hour walk, right? So, um, and I thought to myself, okay, traffic is one thing. Sorry, getting hit by a truck on my way home is another thing. Getting mugged is one more possibility at this hour in the night, right? But the worst thing will be the chatter in my mind, the fucking shit talking that I will do for that entire walk, right? Which is that you're a piece of shit. You couldn't even fucking talk to this girl. Like, it was the easiest thing in the world and you didn't do it, blah, blah. I was like, that is far worse than anything this girl could say to me, right? Like, so let's just go for it. Let's do it, right? And then I was like, okay, three, two, one, boom. Hey, are the flowers in your hair real? She was like, no, they're totally fake. And then boom, like the conversation started, right? But yeah, fighting fear with fear is very, very important if the positives just don't work. Like, I think it's two negatives make a positive. Fuck
Yeah.
it. You right? Like, action is scary, but regret is scarier, bro. And I think just reminding yourself of the real consequences of not acting is incredibly important, because you gotta remember why you do this, why you're here, and what you want to become. And that's what gives you the strength to push through that hard part, that fear and that doubt and that disappointment and all of that shit, right?
I feel like I feel like that's exactly what I want to achieve with our conversations going forward, because we all have these dreams that are not goals, that are just separated by goals from actions. They are larger than life. They're sometime, like you described it, they're somewhere in the future. They're a bit too dreamy. You almost feel like they're too good for you. They're too good for you. Like, if they come true, then you'll feel too good. And that's what stops you from acting, because you're like, oh, it's so good. What can I even do to make it real? The two things that he said, like the belief, like you probably don't have the belief that you can do it because there's this chatter in your head that you would have had if you would have walked back that night on the highway for 5.5 hours. And there's the path, you just don't know how to do it, nobody's shown you, you don't have a community. And on that hero's journey, rather specifically, like, who's your mentor, like how and who are those mentors? What I want to do next episode, or one of the next episodes going forward, is I want to get a guest. I want to get someone who's relatable, but who's achieved one of these dreams. Like, I have a friend who I spoke about in my previous podcast, in our previous episode. She's this med student, and she is just like us. And she bought a DJ deck in the pandemic and just started mixing it. Um, because she just enjoyed it. She did it for like 2 years, and she gradually kept leveling up. I don't know how she balanced like med school and this during like the pandemic and after. And 2 years later, she played the closing set at Melbourne's top rated nightclub. And I asked her after I was there for it. It was absolutely exceptional. People loved it. And she did all of this while being a med student. And then I asked her, how'd you do it? And she was like, if I can do it, you can do it. It was not easy, it was hard. I felt like when I was up there playing this set, I felt so vulnerable, I felt like I was going to screw up. After this set, I'm feeling like I could have done these things better. Yeah, I did it. And the reason why I'm talking about this is because what she told me was that she humanized the like this grand dream that I also have of wanting to play this DJ set at this moment. And she's like, I'll tell you the steps and I'll tell you all the points at which I felt crippling doubt, fear, dealt with all of these problems. And because she's my friend and because I know her so well, she's so relatable to me. She's like you. I almost feel like out of deep respect for her, that I know that she's so good and she's done this and she has all of these capabilities. I still feel like if she can do it, then I can do it, because we're the same people and she's humanizing this dream for me. And I feel like whenever people try to chase any of these obscure childish dreams, the first thing is, I'm not the person built to do it. And I don't know anybody who's done it, who's like me, who's done it for you. Like, I don't know who somebody who's like serious, who's done a stand-up comedy set. For me, like, I don't know somebody like me who has no background in music, can't ever hold a tune, I don't know anything to like play a DJ set. How do you even do it? Like, it's not possible. I want to get people and take them through their, like, use the hero's journey and go on a conversation with them to explain to them how they did, explain to whoever's listening how they did these, like, achieve these obscure dreams while the odds were stacked against them, and just unlock, like, help people believe in themselves and show them the path to do it.
Big adventure that we go on in our lives tends to follow this structure somewhat. And viewing some of my own challenges in this light helped me realize that I've overcome like a bunch of difficult shit, and I've taken action to turn some of my dreams into reality. And that there were some common patterns that I can apply to other things that I'm really, really afraid of, that I'm more afraid of than I was of whatever it was that stopped me from doing those other things that I did, right? And I want to see how other people go through that process and how it differs from mine, or what commonalities there might be. Because fundamentally, like, I'm doing this
Yeah.
for me, right? What follows is I want people watching this who are trying to get started on the path to any big thing that they want to accomplish, big or small or whatever. It's something that they think is improbable,
Yeah,
childish,
whether,
like a
yeah,
dream
whether
that
they
they
want to
have.
be like a Bollywood actor, or whether they want to be a DJ, or whether they want to be like a doctor when they don't feel like they have the fundamentals of like attention, etc. Anything, it can be anything. And I think we should source it from people. We should ask them what is a childish dream that they've had, that they're trying to, like, that they want, that they thought that they never have, that they never accomplish, and then get the right person who's relatable enough to come here and speak about it, so that people can take away something and then start.
That's what I also think our biggest value add is going to be. But I think where I want to end this today is I want to make a commitment. Like you, my one of my, I don't know if I want to call it like a fear I have or just a consequence I do not want, right? Is that we stop much before the ordeal and like the actual difficult parts show up, right? Like I want this to be an example for us, right, of what happens when you actually, you're vulnerable and you pursue that thing that you thought you didn't deserve, and then you actually got it. And I want to make sure that we keep recording again and again and again, because there's like a million podcasts out there, yes, right? Every fucker has his own podcast, right? But what separates like the best of them are two things: authenticity and consistency, right? I want this to be like both of those things. That's it. Like nothing, it isn't fancy. It's like you just keep recording, you keep talking about things that matter to you, and you keep putting yourself out there again and again and again, right? Despite how afraid you are. And that's how I want this journey to go.
Yeah. What if we never stop?
I,
Like, what if,
what if we never stop? Yeah.
like, I'm just thinking, if people don't have to see it, if they don't want to see it, it doesn't have to add value to people. We will try to add value to people, but if that doesn't align, that's fine. But what if we keep having these conversations, I don't know, till we're 60 every day? That's a beautiful story. I mean, that's just on us, right? That's not on anything else.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes.
And yeah, so if we, at the end of the day, it's like I am getting personal value from these discussions anyway. And then others
Yeah.
can, the universe can reflect that energy back if it chooses to. And if it doesn't, that's also all right. but consistency matters more. Cool, let's do this.